The air was heavy with perfume and wet earth. Cameras clicked in rapid bursts as the coffin lowered into the ground, the sound of shutters blending with the priest's weary voice. A wall of black umbrellas shimmered under the drizzle, like a forest of glossy crows. I stood at the front, face streaked with tears, shoulders trembling as though the weight of the world pressed down on me. My hands clutched the damp tissue until it tore between my fingers. I let out a sob that cut through the murmur of rain. It was perfect, raw, convincing. The family stood stiff and dry-eyed behind me, too polished to crumble. But the paparazzi didn't want them. They wanted me, the tragic young woman, broken by grief, the picture of love lost. I gave them what they needed. I always did. When the service ended, I bowed my head, whispering a name I had practiced the night before. Then I slipped away before the cameras could corner me for more. By the time I reached my car, the mascara had smudged into shadows beneath my eyes. My chest ached from the forced sobbing, but I was good at ignoring that ache. I slid behind the wheel, exhaled, and started the engine. For a moment, silence. Just the soft tick of the idling engine. Then I turned, casually, to the passenger seat. He was there. The man whose body now rested 6 feet under. Pale, gaunt, in the same immaculate suit I had watched vanish into the earth. His gaze was empty, but locked onto me, as if searching for something he couldn't name. I didn't scream, I didn't run. Instead, I pressed my lips together, wiped at my ruined makeup, and muttered, "Fine, I guess you're coming with me." His hollow stare didn't shift, but he stayed. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the graveyard. You're probably wondering what the hell you just saw. A girl, calm as anything, talking to a corpse that should be rotting in the ground. Let me back up and explain. My name doesn't matter. What matters is what I do, or what I'm paid to do. I'm an actress, or at least I used to be. The kind who knew how to cry on cue, how to let her voice break just enough to make people lean in, how to look shattered but beautiful all at once. Trouble was, Hollywood didn't care. I was one of a million faces waiting for a phone call that never came. But then came this job, mauler for hire. Yes, it's real. Yes, people pay for it. Wealthy people, mostly, men and women who built empires and reputations but forgot how to build anything human along the way. Their families want to soften the edges for the cameras, to convince the world the dearly departed was adored. So they hire me, I show up in black, weep like I've lost my heart, and the photographers eat it up. It's a disgusting business, but it pays better than waiting tables. And if I'm honest, I'm good at it, too good. Because unlike the others, I don't just pretend. I research. I learn who the person was, what scraps of humanity they left behind, a song they once loved, a charity they supported, an interview where they laughed, just once, without their mask on. When I cry, I'm not crying for the tycoon in the headlines. I'm crying for the child they once were, the human beneath the empire. And that, as I found out, makes all the difference. It didn't start with a shadow in the corner or a cold breath in the dark. That would have been easy to explain away, easy to laugh off. It started smaller. One night, after grieving the life of what everyone else saw as a stuffy hotel baron's funeral, I came home, poured myself a glass of wine, and collapsed onto the couch. My throat was raw from all the weeping, my chest sore from heaving sobs that weren't mine. I flipped on the TV for background noise and closed my eyes. That's when I heard it. A cough, just a single, dry cough. I froze. My apartment was too small for echoes, too cramped for tricks of sound. I muted the TV. Silence. I told myself it was nothing, drained my glass, and went to bed. The next morning, my radio alarm woke me with a song I'd never programmed, an old jazz piece, scratchy with age. I didn't recognize it at first, not until the chorus began. Its lyrics were familiar. I remember reading about it in a profile the night before. It was his favorite record, The Billionaire in the Ground. I shut the radio off and didn't turn it on again. But the signs multiplied. A faint cologne smell, sharp and expensive, lingering in my kitchen. A shape in the mirror behind me that vanished when I turned. Sometimes, when I walked through my apartment, the floor creaked as though someone was keeping pace just one step behind. It was like living with an echo that wasn't mine. I thought I was losing my mind. Stress, exhaustion, the toll of pretending to love the dead. But then came the night I couldn't deny it anymore. I woke to the sound of weeping. Not mine, not the muffled, controlled sobs I'd trained into an art. This was jagged, broken, a sound of someone who didn't know how to stop. The corner of my bedroom was darker than the rest, like the shadows had thickened there, heavy and wet. And in that dark, a figure sat slumped, face buried in pale hands. I couldn't breathe, my body screamed to run, but I stayed, frozen. Slowly, the figure lifted its head. His face was pale, sunken, the same I'd seen in photographs, the man I had grieved as though I loved him. His mouth opened, but no words came, just that hollow stare, pleading for something I didn't understand. I did what I had trained myself to do at funerals. My throat tightened, tears pricked my eyes, and I whispered his name. The sound filled the room. And then he was gone. After that night, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Stress and sleeplessness can do strange things. When the agency called me with another assignment, I jumped at the chance to bury myself in work. This one was a woman, a philanthropist, polished and distant. The kind of person whose name appeared on museum plaques and hospital wings, but whose family couldn't spare a tear. As usual, I did my research. Interviews, grainy old photographs, one trembling recording where she spoke about a childhood in foster care. That was enough. That was the string I pulled when I stood graveside and let the grief wash over me, pouring from a place I didn't know I still had. I gave them a show, the kind of sobbing that makes strangers ache, the kind of brokenness cameras adore. But when I slipped back into my car afterward, my stomach dropped. Because I wasn't alone. She was there too, the philanthropist, pale lips pressed together, eyes wide and searching, and beside her, just barely visible in the backseat, slumped the man from before, watching me through the reflection of the rearview mirror. My hands shook on the wheel. They didn't speak, they didn't move, they just looked at me, as they're waiting for me to explain what I'd done to them. It didn't stop. With each new assignment, another pair of hollow eyes began to shadow me. In the kitchen, I'd find the philanthropist standing in the corner, watching me rinse dishes. At night, the man sat heavy in the chair by my bed, his head tilted as though studying my dreams. Sometimes I'd catch them together, her weeping quietly, him pacing restless circles in my living room. And then there were more. A young heir who'd overdosed alone in a penthouse suite. A matriarch whose empire devoured her own children. Each one lingered, silent, desperate, clinging to the grief I had given him at the grave. I couldn't escape it. My apartment was crowded with shadows, my reflection framed by faces that didn't belong. Finally, I broke. I reached out to others in the business, the ones who showed up in black dresses and perfect mascara, cried on command, then went home laughing. I told them what I saw, what followed me, how the dead were gathering around me like children abandoned at a train station. At first, they stared, then they laughed. "You're taking the act too far," one said. "You're just tired," another insisted. One woman leaned in close, her red lips curved in a smirk. "Sweetheart, don't let the roles get to you. We don't actually care about them. That's the point." The others nodded, dismissing me like a child playing ghost stories. I wanted to scream, to shake them and force them to see the shadows of my shoulder. But their eyes slid right past the figures that loomed behind me. That's when I realized. It wasn't the job. It wasn't the act. It was me. The dead didn't just haunt my apartment anymore. They followed me. On the subway, I'd glance at the reflection in the dark glass of the window, and there they'd be. The man in his suit, seated across from me, hollow eyes never blinking. The philanthropist pressed against the door, lips trembling like she wanted to cry but couldn't. People around me didn't notice. To them, I was just another tired girl on the train. But to me, the car was packed with shadows no one else could see. At night, they grew bolder. I'd wake to whispers in my ear, breath cold against my cheek. Sometimes I'd open my eyes and see them gathered around my bed, standing in silence, like mourners at my funeral. I stopped sleeping, I stopped eating, my hands shook constantly, as if I'd caught some chill that never left. And still, the agency kept calling. More funerals, more faces, more shadows crowding in. Until the night I broke. I was in my bathroom, gripping the sink, staring at the pale stranger in the mirror. Mascara streaked my cheeks, my eyes sunken from sleepless nights. I told myself I was still me, that I was still whole. But when I blinked, there she was. The philanthropist, her face overlapping mine in the glass, her mouth opening where mine should be. "No," I screamed, slamming the mirror with my palm. The glass spider webbed, cracks splintering across her reflection. Behind me, in the doorway, the man stood, silent, watching. And in that fractured reflection, I saw all of them. The heirs, the matriarch, the philanthropist, the man, my apartment filled with their faces, their shapes crowding closer, pressing in, suffocating me. I fell to my knees, sobbing. "What do you want from me?" I screamed. "Why me?" The room went still. And in the silence, I understood. They didn't want to frighten me. They didn't want to harm me. They just wanted what I had given them. Once, in that moment when I learned their stories and wept for the lives they had lost. They wanted to be seen, to be grieved, to be loved, even if only in death. That was why they clung to me. Because I was the only one who ever had. I don't know what made me try it. Maybe instinct, maybe madness. I sat up, wiped my face, and looked at the philanthropist, the shadow that had haunted my nights. And I spoke to her, not as a ghost, not as a client, but as a person. I told her I was sorry she had grown up alone, sorry that her generosity had bought her statues and plaques but not love. Sorry that her final goodbye had been staged for cameras instead of for a family. And as I spoke, I felt the weight in the room shift. Her face softened, her eyes closed. For the first time, she looked at peace. And then she was gone. Not vanished like before, gone. The air in the apartment felt lighter. The shadows thinned. I turned back to the mirror. The cracks still webbed across the glass, but only my face stared back. For a moment, I almost believed it was over. But then I looked down the hallway. He was still there, the man, waiting, watching, silent. And I knew. This was only the beginning. The first time I truly understood what I was doing, it was raining again. I had just left another funeral, another shadow hitching a ride in the passenger seat. I kept expecting panic, dread, maybe even anger. But instead, I felt responsibility. I remembered the first moment I had grieved the philanthropist, how the weight of her loneliness had pressed against me until I knew it in my bones. It was a spark, tiny but unmistakable, a thread connecting my own heart to theirs. I began experimenting, not just crying for them, but speaking, telling them their lives had mattered, that their struggles, their small joys, their fleeting moments of humanity had been seen, even if no one else had. The effect was astonishing. Some would fade slowly after our conversations, lingering only as a light breeze or a shadow passing across a wall. Some stayed longer, drawn to my empathy, but even they began to ease. Their sadness, once jagged and suffocating, softened. I didn't need to fear them anymore. It wasn't immediate. The shadows didn't vanish in a blink. The man in the suit, who had terrified me with his silent presence, now sat quietly in the corner of my apartment while I worked, as if reading a newspaper he never held. He never scared me anymore. He wasn't waiting to harm me. He was waiting for my acknowledgement, my care. Another hummed while I cooked, a song she had loved in life. Another, a young heir, would appear only when I sat at my desk, leaning over my shoulder like a shy child seeking approval. I stopped screaming. I stopped hiding. I spoke to them as naturally as I would a friend, a mentor, a patient I had vowed to help. And in return, they gave me their trust, their presence, their gratitude. I realized then that this was my job, not for the money, not for the cameras, not for anyone else. It was for them. I drive to funerals now with a sense of purpose I've never had on stage. The first 5 minutes, I perform for the press and the families, just as I always have. But once the service is over, the grief I give is real, drawn from the knowledge I've collected about them, from the care I've cultivated in secret. And the shadows come, always. They follow, but they no longer haunt. Sometimes the passenger seat is empty, sometimes full. Sometimes there's the soft hum of laughter, or a sigh of relief, or a faint brush of fingers against mine in thanks. I smile. I speak their names. I tell them their lives were seen. I know now that loneliness is a powerful thing. It latches onto the living, the dead, the desperate, the forgotten. And sometimes, the only thing that can lift it is a single human willing to care. I used to be terrified of the shadows. Now, I wouldn't trade them for the world. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If you enjoyed the story, please give this video a like. It helps the shadows gather and the whispers spread. Drop a comment below and tell me what country you're watching from. I'd love to know where our watchers dwell. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We're striving to bring the cult together. And our first 100 subscribers are the beginning of something extraordinary. And remember, the cult loves you.